I feel obligated that I have to tell a tomato story now, but and I actually have a really good one too. We, my name is David Drake. I started a company called AMI. Actually, originally AMI was Aqua Management Inc. That's where we got started in water, and we became like AT&T. We started doing so many other things. We were no longer in telephone and telegraph, so we had to change that name quickly. We did start actually in tomatoes. We started with a farmer that was going out there. It was a tomato farmer out in San Joaquin Valley. And he had all these sensors that he had in the field, but not as specific as you guys were doing it. He's been doing it the same way that his parents have been doing it for many, many years. And he's reading the soil moisture sensors, the chemical sensors, whatever they were, and he was faxing that information every morning to a tomato scientist in Spain, and they would come back with the recipe of how to fertigate and how to inject sulfuric acid, if I remember correctly, to bring the pH of the soil up so the plants can take on water and so on and so forth. The interesting thing about that was he just didn't want to do it anymore. So he said, can you bring that data up for me so I can fax it? We said, well, better yet, we'll just bring that data up from these sensors to the tomato scientist. And then he said, that's great. Well, and we said, and we'll also connect that tomato scientist to crop production services that sells you the chemicals. And they make sure that the tanks are filled. And then crop production services says, well, what I like to do is to know how filled the tanks are and what is the rate of injection so I can predict how often I need to go out there and put chemicals in those tanks. So slowly AMI started becoming more and more because all of a sudden we were managing little pumps, and then Grundfos was involved with their DDA, the doser, acid dosers, and so on and so forth. And we're bringing all these different machines to the cloud. We're by no means experts on the machines, and we're by no means experts on any tomatoes, but we're experts at bringing the data up and capturing the data and displaying it the way the customer wants. Now, 8 years ago when we got started, it was by no means IoT or IoT that it is today. So we got started then, and we started building what was later the manufacturers started approaching us and said, you know, this IoT, IIoT is coming up. Yes, we have solutions for the manufacturing floor. There are very smart guys out there that are doing this, but we want a solution where we can deploy with every machine that goes out of the manufacturing. When we sell a machine, a pump, I want to know exactly where that pump's going. And one of our customers actually was from Europe. It was a pump manufacturer, and said, look, I sell all these pumps, billions of dollars worth of pumps. And they go out there, they come to the United States, and I don't know where they go. They go through the distributors, the reps, the distributors, the contractors, and then they go and get installed. And then I have to spend millions of dollars buying back that data from the distributors to find out where they went. And then I can market to them or go to the expos. Further, I really like to build better machines. So I want the data from those pumps to come back to me. And so that's how we approached it. And of course, security was a very, very big deal to us. So we had to use the public infrastructure, the cellular infrastructure and the satellite infrastructure. So we came up with our own protocols, encrypted it, got it certified multiple times and in 108 different countries over many different cellular infrastructures. And slowly that's how the business was created. So even with some of the sensor companies out there and others that came to us, we found ourselves that we're in so many different markets. So quantity of the devices that were going out there and the amount of the data that was coming up was a little bit different than that of what you're used to from manufacturing floor. Give you another example, and I'll pass it out to Julian. We had a company called DXP, which is in oil, approach us and said, we have a customer called Halliburton. They buy these giant pumps from us. And what happens is that they connect to their SCADA systems, and they go out there in the oil fields. They want us to watch these pumps. The problem is that they won't let us into their SCADA system. The IT guy said no. And we sell 30,000 of these things a year. Halliburton's problem is that they want us to monitor it because we're the pump experts. We build it. We're the experts. They want us to monitor that pump and its functionality and be able to predict when that pump is about to go back and then send somebody out there, because the price that they have to pay for one of our guys to get choppered in just to change one little thing is a lot. And we can charge a lot of money for that. And Halliburton is very willing to pay for that money. So they came to us. And we worked with the vibration sensor monitoring and a bunch of other companies, and that's what we did. We deployed this on every machine. Now, from $100,000 pumps to small little $100 pumps. The challenge was, how do we connect all these machines for our manufacturers, but also have a value proposition for everyone in the chain? Because we've also realized in practical world, in real world, when a distributor who's used to selling iron, whether it's a pump or a HVAC system, no matter what it is, he can't sell necessarily IoT. What happened to them when a guy walks through the door and says, I need to replace a $100 pump or a $10,000 pump? The conversation never goes into, I like to also sell you a device that connects it to the internet. It's like when you bought your car and the sales guy just sold you a $40,000, $50,000 car, and now he wants to convince you to buy a XM satellite radio. And you're like, come on, I just paid $40,000 for a car. I don't want to buy a satellite radio. So the idea was include it, make sure the customer, the end user, gets a benefit out of it, make sure the distributor gets a benefit out of it, and most valuably, the manufacturer. And manufacturer was the engineering team wants the streaming data so they can build better product. The marketing team wants access to their customers, so now they know who are all the customers and all the benefits that comes through all the pillars of the manufacturer. And so that's what we did. And Julian from SJ Rhombus, he's one of our customers that is from Greywater, and he'll take it from here. So.
Thanks, David. Sure. So as David mentioned, my name is Julian Achia. I'm with SJ Rhombus company. Just a brief overview of the company. It was founded in 1995, headquarters in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota. 6 manufacturing plants, 5 in the US, 1 in China. We are a 100% employee-owned company, which is kind of a unique model and very successful. We are a leader providing control solutions for the pumping industry. That's all we do. We don't make the pumps, the controls for the pumps. Our market is the water and wastewater market. Especially, it's the pumping system, so the pumping stations. And some of the characteristics of pumping stations, they're scattered in a wide area, which means you cannot connect them hardwired. It has to be wireless. There's also shifts in the United States demography. The population is moving towards coastal areas, and the urban population is growing. For instance, Florida is growing about 250,000 people a year, which means it's a middle-sized city that has to be built every year, which means infrastructure and has direct impact on water, wastewater. The data that needs to be monitored on this pumping station does not require very high-speed data. So it's low speed and it's low amount of volume of data. It is regulated, which means you have the EPA on the wastewater side. On the clean water side, you have the EPA and you have NSF. So having history, having logging is also very important. So something happens, you can go back and look at, okay, what happened and what were the measurements. Being notified if you have an alarm condition is also critical. You do not want to have spills or you have sensors that are out of range, and that causes, it could be in deep waters in terms of legal issues with the EPA. And third, and lastly, like David mentioned, being able to monitor equipment, the health of equipment, and predict maintenance or failures is very critical to that industry. A lot of duplication in the hardware, but also being able to monitor the health is critical. So where was the industry before we stepped in and partnered with AMI? The typical remote system were very expensive, very complex, a lot of radios being used, required high skill, tech level people to go install these things and maintain it and operate them. The data was not secured, being stored on somebody's server somewhere and not backed up sometimes. So, you could have issues there also with regulations and when things happened. Because it was expensive and complicated, they were not installed widely. So you only had the critical stations that were monitored. The little ones were not. So limited. Also no apps. So in terms of portable devices like your phone or tablet with no way to connect to it. Some of the roadblocks to implementing the IoT solution, a lot of the existing systems were SCADA-based, which meant this is all they knew. This is the world they lived in, full-blown SCADA system. And when you tell someone, well, imagine a world where you talk to the cloud indirectly to your machine and not directly to your machine, they just didn't get it. It's an education process that is only beginning to happen in that industry. The wastewater industry has been slow to adopt the technology, but they are doing it now, so it's encouraging. You also have large existing installations, which means the bigger they are, the more they are settled in their ways, and they have a structure around it, very hard to change into a new structure. It's also the bid and spec market, which means there are public bids, and a lot of times they're written in a way where it's just copy and paste. So whatever was specified 10 years ago is reappearing, which makes things a bit harder to change. So our focus was to offer a new solution that was easy to integrate with the existing hardware and also allow us to be disruptive to the industry. Our first go at it was to create our own solution. We are a company that, again, controls. We have an embedded controls division. We said, well, hey, we can do this. So we took a crack at it. We partnered up with some communication companies and tried some things, and it just, we failed. We failed because we did not have the structure in place for the service, for the activation, for the web updating. We are a manufacturing company. We build control systems, large, expensive control system. We don't have the structure to go chase an end user for their service bill. It costs us more to set up a customer than to send them a bill. So it just didn't work out that way. The other thing is the cell technology is changing so fast that by the time you have one product established, the cell tower is already changing from 2G to 3G to LTE. So if you're not ready, if you don't live and play in that market, you get left behind in a hurry, and it's going to be very costly for you to do that. So our partnership with AMI Global was very successful because that's all they do. They do it well. And we count on them to do all these things that we could not do. So what did we do with AMI? The first thing was to create a customized hardware for us that would have a wide range of applications. So the right amount of IOs, the right connectivity to the cellular networks. And once you have the hardware ready, we can have different firmware platform for different applications. From our perspective, we focused on simplicity to the end user. What is relevant to the end user is what matters the most. What matters to us is irrelevant. So we really try to get into the shoes of our end user. How are they going to use the product? What does it mean to them? So we created some web portals with AMI and got feedback from end users. And this is essentially what they see here. This is it. This is what they look at. Pumping station typically looks like this. You have two pumps. They look at your inflow, your discharge flow for each pump, your level. There's various alarms. And this is the status of your pumps. So at a glance, they can look at the station and say, okay, everything's good. Or you can say, oh, we got a problem here, or this is about to fail. Being able to have notification when an alarm happened via email, via SMS. Being able to have a data log in the cloud that's secured, also very important. And of course, customer service. So we did create some hardware. This is an example of a platform, hardware platform that we use. This is an example of data logging that a user can pull out. This is a inflow into a school. So you can see during the week, you got a lot of flow. On the weekend, you got nothing, which is exactly what you're looking for. So you look at the data, you can say, okay, everything's fine. Both pumps are running, and you can look at the health of products. So again, going back to IoT, being scalable, the flexible business model. The key is you customize the product and you give exactly to the user what they're looking for. It's no good for you to think that, okay, this is what I would do. You have to get into their shoes and understand what is relevant to them. What data really matters to them. And a lot of times, they are not going to be able to verbalize these things to you. So you have to go there and observe what the routines are. For instance, we have a user that has about 300 lift stations, and they have a person that drives in the truck in the morning that goes to every station, opens the door, and reads the hour meter, writes it down on a piece of paper, brings it back to the treatment plant, and logs into a computer. With our system, all that just went away. All in the cloud. They click on a button, you could go out there and see all the data. So it makes sense to them. They used to have to go on site, and they couldn't remember what pump was in the, because it's in sewage. So nobody wants to mess with it really. So if a pump fails, they really didn't have a good record of what pump was where. So all that also on the cloud now. So before they even go there, they have the model number, the voltage, all the specs on the pump were already part of that database also. That mattered to them. So when somebody goes out there, they know exactly what to bring and be much more efficient. Being cost effective is another very important aspect to a solution. As a business model, you have to have something that is affordable and makes sense to them as well. There's a lot of SCADA on the treatment side, on the plant side, makes a lot of sense because they need that ability to control and view things in real time. On the collection system, the pumping system, in a lot of cases, it's overkill. And it's too expensive for them, so IoT was the perfect match for them. So where do we go from here? We have a model and we proved it. Like I said, right now, most of the stations, it's a larger station, the critical stations that have SCADA. So our vision is all our controls would leave our plant with a IoT device in it. So that the user would get it, like it or not, you would have it. It goes back to what you're talking about, the XM radio. You buy a new car today, well, guess what? You have the XM radio. It's in your car. You don't have to buy any hardware for it. The hardware is already there. You probably get 3 months for free. After that 3 months goes away, you decide if you want to continue, which you pay, otherwise, you don't get it. So that's kind of our business model going forward, is that you'll get it. The hardware really is not that expensive. The key is to make people realize the value of the data. Continue to simplify the user Experience also very important. As an engineer, I can tell you one of the biggest challenges is take something that's complicated and make it simple for the end user. And that's really a big challenge. And again, it has to be, you got to put yourself in the shoes of your customer or the end user, understand exactly what their pains are, and create an interface or a product that is simple to set up, simple to operate, simple to troubleshoot. Make it more accessible, more portable, and more affordable. Very critical. As the volume goes up, as more devices become enabled and connected, the price will go down, more apps will be created, and the more users will adopt it and become more accepted. The industry that we are in, water, wastewater, again, we want to be an industry standard. We also want to drive regulations. Right now, there are no regulations in terms of IoT, but we feel it's coming, and we want to be ready for that. And I'm sure in some of your industries, the same thing is probably happening, where maybe not now, there's no regulation in terms of data logging, in terms of remote monitoring, but I can assure you in a few years, it's probably going to come, where you're going to have requirements for that. And again, you want to be ready for that. And I talked about the XM radio. So David, you want to close it up?
Sure. So just to go back on what Julian was saying, our business model approach of it was not necessarily the industry 4.0. If you look at the exact definitions, the industry 4.0 versus the IoT versus the IIoT or software as a service, our idea was, or our thought was, that everything is getting connected, right? From your shoes, your belts, and your watches, and Fitbits, and things of that nature. But on the industrial side also, every machine is going to be connected. We had customers that said, by 2020, when somebody walks into a Grainger or any of the places that they buy industrial machines, they're going to have two options. You want the connected machine or the unconnected machine, whether it's HVAC machine or a pump or a sensor. So we wanted to kind of get ahead of that and say, well, if you're implementing the industrial IoT on top of the IoT, what you have to take into the consideration is the end user, like Julian said, what the end user wants to see is completely different than what the distributor might want to have access to, the one that is giving service to that machine, all the way down to the manufacturer. So there's different people in the process that want a bit of that data and relevant data to them. So for example, if you look at, going back to a pump, if you're looking at a pump, the manufacturer doesn't really care how many gallons per minute you're pulling from that pump, but the guy who's servicing it might want to know, but also wants to know how are you managing that pump on a pump curve, what type of vibration does it have, and so on and so forth. The manufacturer at the same time on his side, he wants a stream of data coming in to find out how he can build a better pump, better turbines, and so on and so forth. That's just an example of one product. Same thing on sensors, and so on and so forth. Now, as an end user, you also want people who are giving you service to have access to that data. So the data and the machines are standard. So our goal is to build embedded devices. We're working with other companies, other manufacturers, to build embedded devices that goes inside those machines, shipped outside the manufacturing. And when it comes back, the data that comes back from it, if you think about like OnStar, the amount of the data that GM gets from your car is way more valuable to GM than it is to you. God forbid you get in a car accident, you're paying them $10 a year that the car is going to make an automatic call to 911, which you could probably do from your cell phone. Are you going to take that risk? You're always going to be like, when I cancel it, that's when that's going to happen. So, but GM is getting so much data from your car, and they're also reducing their warranty cost, right? So they're telling you, you got to go get your oil change. Same thing that is happening on manufacturing side with smallest to the largest machines. The manufacturers, outside of their manufacturing floor, on the IIoT side, they want to know who's the customer. I want to have a portal. Julian showed you a portal that you have a website that you log into, you have an app. But if I know who that customer is, this is a customer that said, I like your product. I walked into a store, I paid a couple $100,000 and bought this giant pump that is running my entire farm. I like your product and I see the name. You don't know who that customer is, right? So we think in the future of IIoT, the manufacturer would love to see who that person is and be able to communicate with them through an app and otherwise too. So that's our goal. That's what I'm hoping that if you have any questions, I can answer for you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, David and Julian. We have time for one question if we have a question.
I did such a great job.
You did a great job. All right, thanks everybody.